All right, and as always, everyone, this session is being recorded and it will be made available on our website by the end of the week. So if you missed any part of it, please check back. And there you go, Adam.
All right. Good stuff. Well, welcome everybody. I am doing a bit of a new topic. Let me zoom this in a little bit here so you guys can see a little better. There we go. We're going to talk about reporting services today, a few different things in reporting services. We made the title of it, Bringing Sexy Back to Reporting Services, but that really takes a few different meanings. So we're going to do kind of a two-part presentation today. I'm lucky enough to have one of our BI architects, Craig Love, here with me. He's going to present in a couple minutes after I get done talking. So I'm going to try not to talk too long so he gets some opportunity to go through his stuff. And we kind of broke this up into two sections. So I'm going to talk about a really cool technique that you can use to deliver a lot of information about your cube and about your analysis services reporting capabilities out to your end users, and even to give them some simple reports that they can use to deploy on their own. So without using things like Report Builder and things like that, without actually having to go in and build the report. We're going to build one report that's going to do all kinds of really neat stuff for them. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to take a look at some of the problems with reporting. So I don't know if you have any users that you have to put labels on the reports like this stapler, but in reality most users are struggling with what do they need to ask? Who do they need to ask to get the data? What data do we have available? Because it seems like every time they go to ask for some new data, they get told, oh, well, I don't know if we have that. We have to go find it. We have to figure out where it is, all that type of good stuff. And at the end of the day, the one department in a data-centric organization that is probably the most contentious is anything that has to do with reporting. There's always a backlog. There's always users who aren't happy. You're having to get the same report with 6 different columns and all that kind of stuff. And you've seen me use that as a reason for building analysis services cubes in the past. And it's a great reason because you can publish that information out and allow the users to go build some of their own reports in Excel and other things. But a lot of companies say, well, we don't want our users to use Excel. We just want them to be able to have some simple access right to reporting services, but we don't want to have to create all these different individualized reports. And so I'm going to show you a technique today that's just a fundamental technique. It's actually a version of one of the recipes from SQL 2008 Reporting Services Recipes, the book that's published by Rox Press. But we tweaked it a little bit, made it our own, and I wanted to kind of show it off to you. But if you want to get good code examples and good examples of how to do some of this stuff after the fact, because there is a lot of code underneath this, so we're not going to build it all together during during the webinar. We have a 3-hour webinar, but what I'm going to do is tour you through the solution and show you each of the pieces and how they work together and why it's really, really important to be able to deliver things like this for your end users and how it's going to deliver a lot of value. So your end users are always saying, how come I can't have access? Maybe they need to have a little bit of cake. Typically, it's mostly security policies, departmental warfare, cranky DBAs. I've been a cranky DBA. Now I'm just a cranky whatever I am today. And self-service reporting is a myriad of different options, right? We have Report Builder, we have Power Pivot, we have Excel, we have all these different things, but all of them ultimately require the end users to, sort of hop up and, build their own type of report. And instead, what they really want to be able to do is tweak a subset of relatively simple reports in a relatively finite set of data. So we're going to give them the option to do some of that. And we're going to build a cube browser report. And what it's going to allow us to do is take 2 other reports, which we'll talk about in a second, and combine them and let the users sort of, browse through the cube and build their own reports right on the fly, right from within a reporting services report. And really it's not using anything more complicated than parameters in reporting services and self-referencing drill-through actions. And there is a decent amount of MDX under the covers, but it's relatively straightforward MDX. So for those of you who want to learn a little bit more about MDX or get a little bit more familiar, this would be a great little project for you to undertake because there's good code examples in the recipes book as well as some of the ones that you'll see here today, and we'll kind of walk through the process of building and how those reports work together. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to remove hundreds of those boring user questions like, can I have this same report sliced by geography, by product category, and I need all those by sales amount and order quantity, but I can't have them both in the same report because they got to go to different places. And so ultimately you have this, this report backlog of 70 reports, and they're all only about 2 or 3 degrees of separation from each other. So this is going to give you an option to be able to integrate some different report sets and data sets and begin publishing those out to the end users while you're actually delivering a lot of value, because they're going to be able to go out and, number one, explore what data is available to them in the cube with a cube metadata report. They're going to be able to pivot that data back and forth on the report and do some cool things with it with our dynamic rows report. And then they're going to pull those two things together and be able to actually browse the cube in our cube browser report. And so there's a lot of really cool things that we can do with this. And so we'll talk about these reports really quick, and then we'll jump in and start taking a look at the demo. The dynamic rows report is very simple. All it's doing is taking very similar reports and giving it some parameters that control the display. And if we take a look at that report, it looks very, very simple. Very, very simple, right? Just a dynamic rows report. And when we preview this, what we've got is the ability to control what's going on in the report, and we've set up parameters for different measures that will allow us to change and make some of those dynamic. Now, if we come over here to our design area, you'll see that in order to do this, we created a couple of parameters. We have a parameter for changing which hierarchy is going to be displayed on the rows and allowing that drill up and drill down, and we created a parameter for which measure we want to show. Then we came down and looked at the data set that we created, and we created a little bit of MDX. I know this looks like a lot of MDX, but it's just a couple of calculated members that we're using in MDX. And again, if you want code examples off of this, if you go to rocks.com, you can download the code examples for the recipes book right on there. And most of this code should be relatively intact. The demo from Rocks is completely functional, so if you want to go grab that, it's just going to function slightly differently than ours. So we've basically got our ability to bring back all of our data from our cube. We have to hard code the cube here because it has to be specified, unfortunately, but it would be nice if we didn't have to do that. It's just an issue with the MDX, the way we have to code it. We can test our execute, and that looks good. It's bringing our data back. And part of the reason that we want to use custom MDX here instead of just writing kind of a blanket select statement is when we get to our cube browser, that report is going to run incredibly fast. Most parameters, when you're doing parameter-based reporting in reporting services, are running that parameter MDX query over and over again. So sometimes you'll get, one report that for one parameter will execute 20 different queries in a row, all with slightly different filters. And that's not good. That means the user's going to have to wait. It makes it more complicated to develop. So by us being able to return very specific calculated measures that relate directly back to our parameters, we're able to deliver some really cool functionality and allow people to drill in and drill up. The other thing we did here was put a simple expression on the format value here so that it would show like this: 509,000, 5.9 million, 11 million, 13 million. And let me sort my properties over here. And if we come over here, we can see what that expression looks like. Make that a little bit bigger. And this is just a handy little trick. For those of you who are pretty good at reporting services expressions, this won't be anything new. But for those of you who are trying to get into doing some better formatting and some other cool little tricks, this is a really nice way to basically show any number of dollar amount or count values without having to worry about how wide your expression column needs to be. So some pretty cool stuff there. The other thing that we did was we added, we added an action for the row label that self-references the report and just recalls the row member for our new row as it passes it into the query and the measure that we want to see. And that's what's driving this functionality right here. So as I click, I'm drilling in and down. It's just recalling the same report with a different row member and the same measure that I happen to pass in. And of course, I'm controlling the measure with a drop-down here. It's not dynamic. We're going to make that dynamic when we get to the Cube browser. But this is just the foundation report for one of the two pieces for what we're going to build in our Cube browser. So pay attention. We've got our drill up, our drill down, and the ability to pass in what we're going to do here. And the next thing we're going to take a look at is the metadata report. This is one of my favorite things that we're able to do in reporting services, bar none. And you know what? It's pretty exciting. So one of the things that's always a struggle whenever we do analysis services projects with clients is, well, how do we let the clients know, what's in the cube, what's available, what they can do? And of course, we have a documenter product that does that, and it's great, and it has all sorts of cool functionality. We're not here to talk about that, but there's a lot of information in analysis services. You'll notice here I'm connected to analysis services, my local analysis services instance, and there are all these DMVs that you might have used as a DBA or as a SQL developer that we can go in and query and get schema information about our cube. So we can go in and get what tables and columns and cubes and dimensions and hierarchies and anything we want to know, for the most part, all the way down to mining structures and KPIs, all kinds of good stuff. And then, of course, there's discover statements so we can see what's going on as the system's actually running. But we're really focused on our metadata statements. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use our cube metadata report, and we're going to take a look at how we can leverage some of those queries. And what we're going to be able to do is take a simple query that looks like this, where we're going to go in and pull, I want to know which dimensions are attached to measure group reseller sales for the cube channel sales. Now, we refer to it as a cube, but it's really a perspective inside of analysis services. Don't be caught up in that. It just happens to be what they name the column. So if we run this, I can come in here and see, wow, there's a lot of dimensions that are related back to these individual measures, and it gives me the cardinality for them. And again, these are DMDs that are all built into the system. They're not built, I'm not worried about having to write custom code to get this data or anything like that. I just have to write simple select statements to pull that data back out of my cube, and it's going to give me all kinds of really good information. So we're going to take that and we're going to build a report that allows me to see my cube, my measure groups, my measures, what dimensions relate to them, what hierarchies are available. And in order to do that, make this a little bit wider there, it's going to work like this. So an end user can actually come in here and say, well, I want to see for direct sales, I'm concerned about my internet orders. I want to see my internet order count and see what kind of data can I get about my internet order count. Well, I can get my customer data, my customer geography data, and I can see by country, state, and province. So an end user can come in here and take a look at these queries that we've put in, which I'll show you in just a second. This is a little bit of a complicated report, so I wanted to kind of show you what you're going to be getting out of it before we started wading through a little bit of code. But at the end of the day, this is going to give your end users a lot of capability to come in here and say, what do they want? What do we want to be able to look at? Different product categories, what kind of levels are we interested in? And they can actually take this and mark it up and screenshot it if they want to and help send it over to help with requirements. And that delivers a huge amount of productivity boost because they're very specifically aware of what they can access quickly and what they're not going to be able to access quickly, what might not be in the cube or might not be in the perspective or view or security mode that they might have access to. So in order to do all this, we're basically creating a couple of objects here where we're just going to need one column, and each one is going to talk to the other one. We've got some parameters, very similar to our dynamic rows report that we just took a look at. One to control the measure, the cube, the measure group, dimension, and the hierarchy. And of course, we need a few more here because we've got a few more levels that we need to look at. We've also got a number of data sets. And this expands all the way out, so I'm going to shrink these and make them a little bit easier to read. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, great. Now, when we take a look at these, let's say databases or cubes, we can go to our data set properties, and you'll notice that our query is set up as an expression. And the expression is just an MDX query. So why couldn't we just type in the query? Most of the time it's because we have punctuation in here that reporting services cannot interpret very well unless it's put in as an expression. MDX is a very punctuation-heavy language, and so we want to make sure that, as we're doing queries in MDX, if we start to see weird syntax errors and you go, I know I'm not an MDX expert, but this is just a select statement and it runs fine in Management Studio, and I know I'm not losing my mind, before you start crying too long, cry a little bit, before you start crying too long, come in here and just make it an expression and see if that fixes your problem. Because most of the time, if you have square brackets, dollar signs, other things like that, ampersands, things that you know you're going to see in reporting services expressions, those can tend to trip it up if you don't have it set up as just a string expression for the query text. The other thing that we have on some of the data sets is we have parameters set up, obviously, to be able to pull back data in a filtered way so that we're going to get the most bang for our buck. We've also got some text box properties set up. Oops. Specifically around our fill. So we set up a few fill expressions. These are really good just to call out different lines in your report. This is a pretty common kind of thing, but for those of you who are designing reports and they're just all one color all the way down, they can be a little bit hard to read. And so what you'll notice is when we go to our preview report, you'll notice this lemon chiffon, which is a very fancy way to say vanilla. We've got that every time we highlight something, it's going to carry through for us, so we can always see the exact path that we're taking a look at and get the most information we can from our other report. So when we started this report, the first thing we did was we added our cube and perspective area, and that came from our cubes data set, right? Very straightforward. But then we wanted to add other things. We wanted to be able to go from cube to measure group to measure down and so on and so forth. So in order to do that, we had to add a parameter for each one that we wanted, very similar to our dynamic rows report, and we had to add a data set for that. And in turn, what we wound up doing was adding a self-referencing action, and as we go down the path, you'll notice that each action takes on the parameters that it needs to actually filter itself. So for measure group name, we've got measure cube and measure group. For measure name, we've got measure cube and measure group. And then as we get down to things like hierarchy, we've got cube, measure group, hierarchy, dimension, extra ones that we know we're going to need to actually be able to filter down. We also added some grouping up here. And we're grouping our measures by their display folder. So if we've got all of our measures in our cube broken out by, being displayed in different folders like, finance calculations versus inventory calculations and things like that, excuse me, we want to be able to sort those in the right order and group them. So we've got sorting and we've got grouping on that same properties. And reporting services gives us a lot of flexibility to do grouping. We can add custom expressions and all that, but we really wanted to try to keep this pretty straightforward. The biggest reason is because some of these, for instance, some of these expressions are using parameters, and so some of the pieces can get a little bit more complicated. Plus, we know you're going to be using some MDX that might be a little bit unfamiliar, so we wanted to try to keep the visual part of it pretty straightforward, so you weren't too focused on grouping and sorting and things of that nature. So that's all stuff that we can pull out and add some visualizations to. Craig's going to talk about some cool visualizations some spark lines and gauges and some other cool stuff in a few minutes, and we'll chat about how we can kind of tie all that together before we finish up. So as you can see again, for each one of these, except all the way at the top level, we're taking, which cube do we need for the measures. As we go further down, we'll have additional parameters that we're using to pull that data in and actually display it. So this report, like we already took a look at, is really, really useful in a number of situations. The biggest one is if you want to include a help button on your other reports. So if you've got a bunch of other reports that are pulling out of the same cube or the same environment, your end users are going to be able to get a lot of bang for their buck by just saying, oh, I wonder what product categories is, or how that filters down, or what other promotions could I have access to. They can click a help button in one of their reports and launch this report, and all you have to do is pass in these values to the parameters, and you're done. A very, very simple, straightforward action that can all be done dynamically with an expression. So some really, really cool things that we can do. I said earlier there's a lot of functionality here for things like requirements gathering, having the end users go out and say, tell me the different things that you need on your report. It's kind of a menu of things you can pick from, and you can take a look and see how things relate. There's also, I use this a lot to be a meeting facilitator. So they'll go in and we'll have 5 different people that all think we're storing data 5 different ways, and I'll say, actually, no, you've got it exactly like this. The greatest thing about this report is not that it does this, or that you can use it for meetings, or that people can use requirements. It's that you'll never have to touch it. So when you add 6 measure groups and 20 dimensions and 10 new hierarchies and 6 new perspectives, the report's already up to date because it's pulling all that data from your DMVs in analysis services. So everything that gets added is all there. It's all ready to go. And so that's the part of it that's really exciting to me, is it gives you this kind of map that is going to really drive a lot of functionality and a lot of use for your end users as they're building their report. So now that we've got the cube metadata report and the dynamic rows report, it's time for the cube browser. And the cube browser is going to allow users to browse through the cube, aptly named, right? We actually call it something else when we work with our clients, but if you want to go find it in the book code, it's actually called Cube Browser, so that's why I left that name up there so you guys will be able to reference it easily. You want to make sure that end users can do some of their own quick reporting, nothing to update, and it's very, very fast. So the amount of data that we're pulling back is fairly significant because we're querying through a lot of different data. And this is a relatively simple version of that report. And I have a little bit fancier version that we'll take a look at in a second. But just to get you started, the report is going to allow people to come in here and say, well, I don't really want to look at gross profit. I would rather look at order count. And I don't want to look at it for April 2004. I want to look at it for Q1 in 2004. And you'll notice how all of these are dynamically updating. I also want to see only my North America, and that's going to drill down and see United States and Canada. And if I only want to see United States, I can up this to, let's say, 7 columns. Now I can see all my districts. And the way that we did some of that was we added the capability to do dynamic rows to the table, just like we did the dynamic columns before. So we have some self-referencing actions to be able to do that. We added a dynamic filter so that whenever it's clicked, that filter runs automatically. And we linked this report to the metadata report. And so if you take a look here at the data sets, you'll notice we're pulling back a lot of information here. And we've got this pretty significant amount of MDX that we're taking a look at. But really what we're looking at is a bunch of different calculated measures and our ability to pull that data back. We've also got parameters for that query. They're looking for what row member did we click on? What cube are we currently looking at? What measure group, and row count did we want to see? Are we looking for which date member and filter member, column member, etc.? So having those along with some actions on some of these different boxes, we've got tooltip expressions that are going to show off which hierarchy and which thing we're actually clicking on for the columns. There's a lot of good functionality to be able to check this out. Oh, excuse me, there's one other thing I want to look at there. We've also got these self-referencing actions for things like swapping columns, swapping the filters. They're just recalling the same report and updating the actual filter in the process. So when we go to look at the preview, and I'm looking at my North America 7 columns, I can actually swap this, or in the United States rather, I can swap my columns and my rows all day long. And this is pretty cool for an end user. So they can do this for really anything that they have in the cube. So we could leave promotion and we can look at, let's look at products, and let's look at product subcategory. And we're able to drill, or just look at this, and we can drill up to each level, just like at bikes. I want to see touring bikes, and all of this is really, really, really cool for functionality's sake. So this has some cool features. We're able to, drill up and down and around. What we can do, if we come back over here and we take a look at some of these headers, you'll see we've also got actions that are calling this cube browser metadata report. So as we click on a header, that's going to call the cube browser metadata report, and it's going to pull back the values that we need to be able to select from. And it's going to set all of these values based on what we select. So like I showed, I can't even talk today. If we want to come in here and look at total product cost and switch these around, and we can go to even finance. So we can actually go from sales over to financial reporting, over to amount, and we can look at, let's not do that by product category, that's not very helpful. We can do it by organization. And we can look at North American operations, just for North America, USA operations, and let's do that by departments. So we've got lots of data that we can come in here and adjust and do really cool things with. But we can take this a little bit further if we want to. So this is obviously a useful report. It's pretty cool. There's some really nice dynamic things we can do there. But if we want, we can take a look at a couple of other things that will make that report even better. And I'm going to load a report here just one second, and I will show you what I mean. All right. So now you guys can see a little bit different version of this report, and all we've done is change some of the layout a little bit, added some double layer spark lines here, some kind of cool things. We can take a look at bikes, accessories. Again, this is all AdventureWorks, so we can make all of these have the focus and drill through them. But we did add a couple of interesting things where not only can we go in here and change our measures, but we can also go in, and if I wanted to, I could just select January 2nd, but most of the time your end users are not really focused on one particular date. They're really focused on a date range, something like January through March or April through March, and that's going to give them the capability to drill in, switch filters, switch columns, and all we did was we added a sub-report to this, which is the thing doing the spark lines, and just overlaid it with a report that had the numbers. I just aligned them and made them a little bit more capable from that perspective. So there's a lot of cool things that we can do with this type of technology. Reporting services is going to give us a lot of capability to do things dynamically, and that's really what we're after. We're after the ability to run and filter and do things with MDX and analysis services, largely driven by parameters. And if we build things like the Cube Dynamic Rows Report and the Metadata Report, we can use those to just rerun and bolt on to additional reports and really be a fundamental foundation for a lot of the types of analysis that we want to be able to do. Plus, it gives your end users, most organizations are not going to have a very formal data catalog and report catalog and all those things. Most organizations are struggling just to keep up with the demand. And like it or not, your end users are typically going through the same thing. So we have reporting folks that are very, very busy, very, very, probably overworked, and we've got a lot of end users who are trying to get data so they can make decisions faster because they're being asked to do more with less in today's economy. So that's really what this report solution is all about. That's one of the reasons when we started using it a while back, I thought it was so exciting because it gives our clients a tremendous advantage to be able to do a lot of this type of work on their own, and it helps them even gather requirements for projects that we're going to come in and help them with, internal projects, just to be able to mock things up relatively quickly and show off some of the things that they would want to do a little bit more formally. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you. I thought a cool little Cube browser would be kind of fun to take a look at. So I want to take this opportunity to turn it over to Craig. We'll get switched over to his screen here in just a sec. And we'll hear about some other cool visualizations that we can do in reporting services that you guys can explore. So Craig, you there, buddy?
I am.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
I can. I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter, so you'll just accept the pop-up.
Alrighty. All right. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Okay. First, just a little background. I guess I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is I don't have any PowerPoint slides. That's bad news is that you have to listen to me drone on for a second or two here. Just give you a quick background of myself. I've been working with SQL Server since about 1998. Start off, as many people do, as a coder. And somewhere along the way, I fell into the database world. Still not quite sure how that happened. I don't know of too many people who, when they're small, want to grow up and be DBAs or database developers. It's kind of a twisted bunch of us. I take some consolidation. I think that girls love us and guys want to be like us, but but that's just my own little personal bubble. Start off doing lots of standard database development work, OLTP, and was working on that for quite a number of years until about 2006 when I went to a Microsoft-sponsored presentation at my local SQL Server users group, Nova SQL, Northern Virginia SQL Server users group up here in Virginia. And I had one of those moments where I said, oh, so this is what BI is all about, and really wanted to get into it. And since then, my life was changed radically. I have muscle twitches and to show for it. Okay, so Adam's a tough act to follow, but what I would like to do is to show everyone some fairly simple ways to jazz up or improve your reports, and just some quick down and dirty ways to improve some things. I'm going to start off and show you the lowly pie chart. It's been around forever. Gosh, I was cranking out pie charts way back when with Harvard Graphics first came out. I guess that dates me a little bit. I'll promise not to do any flim-flam, the Jim Jams, and things were better then. But we see pie charts quite a bit, and a lot of derivations, stacked bars, and all that. But SQL Server Reporting Services 2008 has some new improvements I'd like to throw in there and show you. Something that's really easy to throw in with very, very little effort. Then afterwards, I think Adam mentioned, I'm going to show you just how to throw on spark lines and some gauges really fast and just touch on some of those items. It's so simple. even a DBA can do it, and that's why they asked me to do it, because this is not my strength. I'm way back dealing with queries and things like that, and in fact, I even have to ask my wife from time to time if my clothes match or if they don't match or anything. So first thing I've got here is this pie chart. Pretty straightforward, nothing fancy. In fact, it's pretty boring actually. The only thing that's going on here is I've got a query against this AdventureWorks 2008 R2, straight T-SQL query. I'm not going to be doing any MDX for you today. Nothing special. It's locked in to go to calendar year 2008. The only thing I did do in here was to put some expressions here on the label properties so that I didn't have to put in a legend, but nothing too fancy, just simple formatting of values and putting in the value of the country. So this is U.S., Australia, Canada, etc. We all know that there's some quick down and dirty things you can do to spice these things up a little bit. We all know about the 3D effects. Actually, the simpler way to get at this would just be to change the chart type. We can do the standard 3D effect, and we could also do or we could do the rings, the donuts, but nothing extraordinary that most of us haven't seen already. Let me set our guy back here to a regular. Here we go, regular pie chart. So one of the things I wanted to show, there's some less obvious formatting settings that are contained for pie charts. One of these are contained in the custom attributes properties, so that when you select the chart series, there's this series of properties in here that you can use to help out and jazz this thing up a little. The first thing that I'd like to show you is the pie drawing style. So we have here right now it's set to default. So you have two extra choices in here. One is the soft edge, and whatever you want to call this, a frisbee, or my son thinks it looks like a frisbee, and that's what he always calls it. The other one is the, it'd be helpful if I selected the right thing. There we go. The other one is the concave setting. And scroll down here. It kind of hides it. There we go. Concave. Already, it's looking a little better. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of work with this a little bit. I'd like to change this. Let's say what our chart is showing here, by the way, is the sales for 2008 for AdventureWorks in millions with one decimal place. So let's go ahead and expand the number of decimal places to show 3 decimal places. And we see that we're running into some problems here because we've got some collisions here. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and put on add the legend here and get those out of there. And that'll give us a little more room. And I'm going to take out the country name. And this should give us a little more assistance, or a little more. There we go, a little better. Of course, it's a little hard to read some of these in the background, so I guess one thing we could do here really fast is let's change the background fill from no color to silver, I think works. It's as good as any. Okay, so now we're able to see these a little more clearly. So already we've got a better looking pie chart. Now, the next, this is nice, but it's still a pie chart and there's nothing really special going on here. The next thing that is good to do is to use the collected style setting. And for this, I'm going to go ahead and start with a new New one. Here we go. Okay, so we're basically back where we were. I've got the Frisbee style going here. By going in here and selecting going back into our custom attributes properties, they have this feature here called collected style. Now the idea here is that let's see here. Excuse me for just a moment. I am off script. There we go. No wonder I picked the wrong one. Okay, here we go, guys. There we are. Now, in this case, I've switched over to use sales by state. Now, instead of sales by country. As you can see, it's very, very busy. Lots and lots of items in here. And this is a pretty standard issue, which makes people not want to use a pie chart because it's useless, really. So what you can do is we can go ahead and use the collected style, and that's again under custom attributes. Go to collected style, and we have two options here. One is single slice, and the other is collected pie. So the first thing we're going to use is collected style, or single slice. And the important thing here is to look at the collected threshold. And what this is going to do is it's going to look at the sum total of all the items in this pie chart. And for all of those that are greater than 4%, it will show them. Otherwise, it's going to collapse them into a single slice. So when we preview, we now have all of these here, and then we have this thing called Other. Now, one thing you'll notice here is our series label here is not very good, and we'll take care of that in a moment. But you can already see this is a much more usable pie chart and much more user-friendly. And we can see that California has the lion's share of it, followed by Florida. So first, let's take care of this expression. Now, one thing I'd like to point out before we get too much further is that, at least on my machine, I don't know if this is typical. I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone else about this since I was preparing for today's webinar, is that when you've got this this custom attribute set to anything other than the collected style, anything other than none, if you go on here and click on these, you get a nice little nasty message. At least I do. So if you do encounter this, just hang tight and make sure that you don't do that. You know, just like the doctor's saying, it hurts when I do something. Well, don't do that. And it may be just my machine. Okay. So we're back here pretty quickly. Nothing was lost. Oh, and I guess that goes back to that save often, save frequently. Okay, so let's take care of these. And the way we can do that is we can go in here and select our properties. And by the way, if you choose to, you can avoid that nonsense by, you can select your labels down here rather than going in here and editing them. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy the format of here, and what SQL Reporting Services gives you is the option to set a custom label just for your other group. So I'm going to go in here into Custom Attributes, and we have these two items here, collected label and collected legend text. So I'm just going to, just to make the point, oops, let's take off the cap locks, legend text, and other label, just to show you where these end up. Okay, so we have other label and other legend text. So you can change these to suit your needs. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that, as in so much of reporting services, these can be made to be dynamic, which is really cool, because in this case, you know, other label, other legend text isn't very helpful. So what I'm going to do is use our expression that we had before, paste it in there. It's not the line total anymore. I'm going to take the values here for threshold total, paste it in there, and let's see if this works a little better. Okay, so now we see that our other legend text is a sum total of 2.6 million. Now, just so that you know, there's no magic here on getting that. Unfortunately, there's no magic for here for getting that other total like I put here, the threshold total. What I did in my query data set was get this ready for this, and there. And oh, of course, this isn't going to work because I have some parameters that I haven't shown you yet. Let's take this to 2008, and we replace all. I think I've got it. There we go. So I went here and actually, on the fly, calculate what the threshold percentage was for anything more than 4%, which is what I had my, which is what I had the other group threshold being set to. So a little bit of a cheat, but that's how we get these things done. I am not sure if there's a better, more sexy way of doing that. One of the things I wanted to touch base with our reporting gurus, but for the best of my knowledge, there is not. So moving forward, one thing I'd like to do here now is let's make this a little more dynamic for our users. As you may have noticed there that I had a parameter already in place. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it the one I have, parameter, set the year back to visible. And now when we run our report, we can actually switch and change between the years. So everything changes, and you can get to, and you'll notice that this query I have actually recalculates the other legend text on the fly, so it works out pretty well. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to show you is the right now is this a little more dynamic is the setting of the setting of the dynamic percentage to be the threshold to be a little more dynamic. So what we've got here is our chart we just had, and working on now. What I've done here quickly before this webinar, so that I wouldn't have to stumble through it and drag you through all these, is added another threshold, parameter threshold. So again, this, when I make it visible and run this, now I can actually do more than just set the year. I can change the threshold percentage, which is really kind of neat to be able to explore this data. So for 2007 at 4%, I get this, but let's say set the threshold up to 7%, and you can see that. Well, there we go. Let's try. Boy, you can tell I didn't try that one out. Let's try 4% at 2008. Okay, 6%. I think I'm going to, all right, well, let's just see what's going on here. Something is not right. So we go in here and let's look at this, because this is very simple. In our custom attributes right here, oh, here's my problem. The collected threshold needs to be set to use that parameter. So I thought I'd set this in here, but we can do it right now. So we go in here, our parameters, parameter threshold, it's that simple. So again, very customizable in here through the use of expressions. Now let's see if it's going to make me a liar. 6%, there we go, a little better. So we switch over to 2008, we have a threshold of 4%. So these, again, these wedges right here, these slices, the 4% means that of the total for this 2008, each of these are at least 4%. And the remainder are contained in this other wedge. So when I increase it, I can start breaking these down a little more, make it 8%. We start getting different dynamics. And we can see our top three are California, Texas, and Washington. So this would give your end users some flexibility if they wanted to change this, and you flexibility if you needed to change it on the fly if you're springing from another report, for instance, as from a drill through. The other thing that's really pretty neat here is the collected pie. So again, let's take a step back here. What we're looking at in the custom attributes is under collected style, the single slice. There's another one called, it's kind of hidden, I don't know why they can't make these default to a larger size, collected pie. So for collected pie, we'll just start with this one. Now what we've got here is, I've switched back to the Frisbee look, and you can see here that I've got our 4% threshold here is other. Actually, no, in this case, none of them. I've got, well, let me back up here. What I've done here, for sake of this illustration, because there are just far too many of these, and you'll see why here in a moment, is I'm only selecting the top 10 states for the calendar year 2005, all of which are meeting the threshold of the 4%. Now, if I were to increase this to 50, which 50 states, I actually think there's only about 35 states in the AdventureWorks data set. You'll see now it switches to other. Pretty nifty, very dynamic. But now let's go ahead and use our switch, get my properties, go back to custom properties, simple slice. It looks like I'm running out of time. I better speed this up a little. Collected. Okay, so we're back here, and if I do increase this to 35 and run this, you see it explodes out automatically. So what it's done here is taken these other wedges and giving you automatically giving you another pie chart. And I put the legend down here on the bottom so it would show them and give us a little more space for these. So this makes a little more sense if we limit the number, or I shouldn't say it makes more sense, it always makes sense, but this would be more usable to have a smaller set of records. And that's why I wanted to put that top number percentage in there. So that gives you the idea of the collected pie, collection style of collected pie.
So Craig, we got about 5 minutes left. Why don't you show us the spark lines and the gauge piece, and then we'll turn it back over to Rachel for like closing announcements and stuff.
Absolutely. It's a little long-winded today. Well, rather than just to show you the final of the spark lines, basically here's our start of our report. The idea here is that this is a pretty standard tabular report, and you can see here this is annual sales by country. Country code, sales 2006, the prior year 2005, and the goal, and our goal percentage. So in other words, of our goal, how much have we gotten to? Makes sense, very usable, but people do better when you give them visualizations. So what we've got here for our final is added in 2 items. First of all, let's just pick 2007. Okay, we've got 2 things going here. First, we've got, this is called a spark line, and it gives our current year sales trend. And we can see, based on this, that we're pretty good in all respects except for perhaps France. And as far as our goals, you can immediately, without having to look at a number, we can see that most of these are in the green, a couple in the yellow, none of them are in the red. And then, of course, this can change from year to year, depending on what you want to see. Now, it's a really easy thing to set up. Now, for my report data, all I've got here is, let's try that again, shall we? All right. Fairly simple report. Now I'm going to give it 2006, 2005. We run this. It's a very simple set of data. You can see there's not much to this. I just have the sales by month, prior year sales, and the country code. And it's as simple of setting up these spark lines. You just drag it in over here from the side, the toolbar. You've got spark line. Drag it in, and you tell it that you want your values to be your sum of your sales, and give it the category group. It's that simple. Some of the other option types you can have is lots of different sparkline types that'll fit right inside of a table report, including here are the line ones that make a lot of sense. We have area charts, we have shapes, we have the candlesticks, and stacked bar charts and stacked bar charts. So for instance, we could switch it over here to this type, run it, and this gives you a sense from month to month of what we're looking at. Now this is just as simple. The main thing to remember is that, let's just blow this up a little. Yeah, the gauges are a little hard to work with unless you make them blow them up a little. But there are some very basic regions here that you have to take care of. First of all, you define the gauge, what type of gauge you want, and there are a series of gauges that you can change. So for instance, you have a large selection of gauge types. And I've got the wrong properties menu, but that's all right. You tell it, you have your pointer. You can have more than one pointer. You can have more than one range. And you can have these frames that indicate whether it's red, yellow, or green. Then you attach the formulas to your range. And in this case, I have set an expression, which gives us the same thing as the percentage. So basically, I'm getting the percentage of current year sales total or over the prior year's sales total. I'm setting a goal of 50% growth, turns it into a value, and then we can see this thing run forward. Now, I kind of whipped this out pretty fast because there's not a lot of, I wanted to get through the essence of it. But one thing I wanted to show you all real fast before I'll let you go is I took this sample from ROCS, the SQL Server 2008 Reporting Services book. There's a lot of neat features you need to dive into that really jazz these things up. Like for instance, on this is just a gauge. You can actually set some neat features on this. So for instance, on the back frame, you can actually put an image on there. Now in this case, I have loaded a couple very simple images embedded in this. So you can see now this is looking pretty darn cool. You can also do things like give it a glass of, you can if you do this correctly. That's frame. Glass effect. Pretty darn cool, and this will really pop out on your screen so that when you throw up this report either in a dashboard or a regular user report, it'll really make people pay attention. And seeing as how I've overstayed my welcome, I'll hand it back to Rachel. I hope this has been useful.
Yeah, I'm actually going to hand it back over to Adam so that he can give everyone the wonderful announcements and encourage you guys to attend his wonderful webinar that's going to happen next Thursday. Adam?
Wasn't that the announcement, Rachel?
Well, there was something about Pièce too. I don't know.
Oh well, yeah. I want to make sure everybody knows we have over 50% of our staff actually presenting at Pièce Summit this year. We're really excited. We're basically shutting down the company for a whole week to get up there and have a great time and see everybody. So if you guys are going, make sure to come by the exhibitor booth area, check us out, get registered, go check out the site at sqlpass.org and click on the summit links. I also want to show off there. I put some links for some folks in the answer window, but I will also quickly kind of make myself presenter here and show you. A lot of you were asking where you can download the code for today. I know that's going to be important. There's a lot of stuff we covered, and it wasn't here, type this, move this kind of stuff because it was so much we had to move through. So this is on rocks.com. Just do a search for the word recipe, and you'll find this book. When you click on the link, just go to download code, and you can get examples of all the different types of things that that Craig and I were talking about today, including some of the Q dynamic rows. These are the base reports that we use to kind of tweak and make our own for the webinar. So like Craig said, a lot of cool solutions in here. Some of you asked when Craig was going to be presenting again. We'll get him up there pretty quick. I know I talked too much and I cut his time short, so I apologize for that. Thursday, we've got a pretty awesome webinar. We're going to be talking about Denali, all the new features in Denali. I've got a crew of 5 or 6 of our top folks who are all diligently looking through and grabbing their favorite Denali features and all the details around that, so they can talk about which items that you guys are going to want to be concerned about, which ones aren't going to really shake up your life too much. I'll be talking about the BI features. We're going to talk about always on. We're going to talk about a lot of the new contained databases, T-SQL features. We'll have some demos to go through with you guys. So it'll be a lot of fun. Come back on Thursday, and we will see you then. Thanks so much for coming.
Thanks, everyone. And just a reminder, this session was recorded, and it will be up on our website by the end of the week. So if you missed any part of it, please do check back. Thanks, guys.